Welcome to the Shining Light Podcast. This is Pastor Sam.
And Patrick, no compromise with evil Wyett.
And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is really relevant, of course, what's going on, and that is gun control.
Oh, I love gun control.
Yeah, now is it true, Patrick, that it's really difficult to hit the target if you don't have good gun control?
You need to practice very good gun control. You want to keep the muzzle, pretty much motionless, looking properly down the sight, proper trigger pull, not squeeze pull. And you get good results if you practice gun control in that way. But I'm afraid it's not our liberal friends that are wanting that sort of gun control.
Wait, that's not what they're talking about?
No, I think they're talking about something completely different, something completely un-American and actually against our God-given right to keep and bear arms.
Really? Now,
I know this is surprising.
Yeah. Now, let's unpack that idea there. This God-given right to bear arms, because some people would like to go in to say that it's not a God-given right, but I'm with you. I think it is a God-given right.
Well, the right to self-defense is given to us by God. That's biblical. In fact, Christ said after he left, if you don't have a sword at that time, sell your cloak, which was a very needed item, which, you didn't have a lot of clothes back in those days. You didn't have, extra sets of clothes like we do now. If you don't have a sword, go and sell your cloak and get a sword. Meaning the time after he would leave, they would be in perilous times and they would need to be able to defend themselves. And this idea of self-defense has happened over and over in the Old Testament. You've seen when the Philistines took over Israel, they prohibited blacksmiths in the land, which was interesting. They would not allow blacksmiths because they did not want them to be able to fashion weapons so that the Israelites would be able to rise up against their oppressors.
So what you're saying is gun control is in the Bible.
Yeah, in its fashion, yes. The sword of their day, today our modern day sword would be a firearm.
Yeah. Now, one thing I think about, of course, I'm a big Sir William Blackstone fan.
I kind of heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that he goes through, and right after he goes over the right to life, which is one of the main things, is that there's almost like a sub-point right after that, okay, a subcategory called the right to limb. Now, the right to limb is that idea of the right to self-defense, is what it's talking about. And if we don't have that right to self-defense or that right to limb to defend ourselves when other people come in and attack us or would have that idea there or want to do us harm, it's as though we shouldn't even have the right to life, because really they're violating our right to life. And that's why the right to bear arms, or that right to limb, that right to defend ourselves with a necessary amount of force, which is where the right to bear arms comes in. Because do criminals today, you look at mass shootings and things like that, they're using guns, not slingshots, right?
Guns, knives, fists, baseball bats, cars, you name it, people get killed by all manner of things. The old saying, I think we've talked about this before in the Old West, was God made all men, Sam Colt made them equal. So the great equalizer, if somebody's much larger than somebody else, a woman can defend herself against a much larger man if she's armed with a firearm.
Right, and there's multiple different things too that people can use. One of the big things that liberals are doing today is called, I think, milkshaking or something like that, where they go and they throw milkshakes in people's faces. Now, what's something that they could be throwing in your face that is maybe a little bit of that consistency of a milkshake?
Well, there's also acid attacks and different chemical things that are also being tossed at people, which, depending on what you're talking about, you could blind somebody permanently. We don't know when something's thrown at your face what exactly is in that mixture. They use bear spray on people too.
I can't even imagine how bad that is.
This sort of thing can, if it hit the right person, if there's some sort of anaphylactic reaction, you could kill somebody with that sort of thing. It's
right.
Not thinking that you're potentially using a lethal weapon over something like that.
Well, I'll be honest here. If somebody were going after my eyes with acid, it doesn't matter if I have pepper spray to get them back with, or if I have just my fists, or if I have a knife, or even if I have a stun gun. That's not going to do it there. I would much rather be able to defend myself by shooting that person, or to at least drawing that gun when I saw somebody coming at me to throw something at me. And that would be the proper amount of defense there, because we're talking about our eyes to permanently impair someone for the rest of their life.
Yeah, that's a significant bodily threat. So anytime you attack anybody with anything. So I saw a video not too long ago where in a minor traffic altercation, it was caught on film, a guy walked up and clocked the other guy and then proceeded to beat him to death. So There was no weapon involved other than fist and feet. And this sort of happened. There are hundreds of people beat to death every year in this country.
Right, but this isn't really quite the angle that we were intending to take here, talking about all this. We wanted to talk about a little bit more relevant thing, and actually go ahead and promote your most recent article, Violence in America, What Changed? And of course, you can find that at theshininglightministries.com. Once again, it's theshininglightministries.com. Go and check out this article. It'll be linked in the description of this podcast. Violence in America, What Changed? But I'm going to ask you that question. What's changed? Because it's very evident that we've got violence in America today.
Well, that's the relevant question. That's what should be asked. Rather than debating, do gun control laws work, or are they legal, or the efficacy of those laws, which we round and round went in these debates. We have the Second Amendment in this country. So what has changed? We used to have this sort of thing happening, given the fact that firearms technology, as it's currently seen in the streets, is well over 100 years old. And if you want to go back to cartridges that allowed for repeating arms, it's over 200 years old. So we've always had access to these sorts of firearms, so it's not the weapons themselves or the availability of the weapons, because weapons used to be much easier to obtain, and this sort of thing is detailed in the article. So what's changed in America? If it's not guns, what is it? And the answer, of course, is we've changed. The moral fiber of this nation has changed. And so what has been the cause of that change? If we want to address, when you hear liberals say, well, what can we do, if it's not firearms? Or what, we want to look at everything we can do to reduce gun violence or any type of violence. Let's talk about crime. What can we do? Let's go to the root cause. What has changed men's hearts from the Bible-based morality we used to share in this nation? What's changed our hearts towards evil, towards lawlessness, towards not caring about their fellow man? Why is our shared morality that we once had no longer with us? Is there a cause to that?
I'll go ahead and quote your recent article. How does that sound?
That would be good. What did I write?
Yeah, well, so in your recent article here, you put, with the introduction of modernism, or liberalism, into the church in the 1920s, heresy and apostasy became mainstream, the church losing its moral influence in society, even as it lost its own moral bearing. Right there, and I think that's kind of starting to hit around what's been going on. And back in the 1920s, this was first brought out, modernism or liberalism within the church, theologically, and this has eventually gone and seeped into the people morality, and we're reaping the benefits of this, of having many generations of immoral people, and that's why they're going around killing each other.
So the root cause of all this is the introduction of a liberalism into our society, liberal ideas, where there's no longer any moral absolutes, and this is taught openly in our schools today. And it has been since 62 and 63, since the Supreme Court in their great wisdom thought they had the power to take God and the Bible out of the schools, God and prayer in the Bible, out of the schools, which they did. Up to that time, we'd always had God, the Bible, and prayer as part of our school system.
Right.
Well, you can't be cramming that down our throats. It wasn't crammed down anybody's throats. It was introduced as the worldview that our society held. Now, you obviously were not forced to be a Christian, but that's the worldview that was taught in the schools. You could do what you wanted to when you got out, or you didn't necessarily have to agree with it, but everybody was civil and nobody was killing each other. When God was taken out of the schools, liberalism then was really able to get hold, as indicated in the article. Several indicators of a society in decay went up. So suddenly divorce rates, school dropout rates, unwed pregnancies, STDs, crime rates, suicide, depression, substance abuse, all these numbers precipitatedly start going up.
Right.
And then the only thing going down was the SAT scores. You start looking at SAT scores, they start dropping. So there was a significant change in our society. Society then the Bible tells us sin equals violence. And I quote some Bible verses about that. When you have sin, a natural outcome of sin is violence. When you have no moral absolutes, where there's no right or wrong, it's all about your feelings, are we surprised? Why do we wring our hands and say, why, how did this happen? Our society, through the introduction of liberalism, has created the very monsters that go on these killing sprees. So if you really want to address the issue of why is society so violent, it's not the guns. It's the people, and it's the people's hearts that have been turned towards wickedness. If you want to address this, maybe we should be looking at the root cause of this, which, ironically, are the very liberals in their ideology that's putting this on us. This is the results of their actions, of that ideology. You want to blame something, that's it.
That's right. And one verse that you quoted in your article is Proverbs 1:7 that says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." And one thing that you kept mentioning there was that that really brought this moral decay in the United States is this liberalism, but it was the removing of God from schools. and of course the removing of God from society, essentially. And I really think that one of the first steps, if not the first step, to destroy a nation is by forgetting God. When a nation forgets God, it's impossible to have a true objective morality. And what are the issues and what are the implications of not having a true objective morality on gun control, or not gun control, but on gun violence and mass shootings? What are those implications? If you don't have an objective morality, would that go and make gun violence go up or down, in your opinion?
It would make all violence go up. So it's moral anarchy. So it's not just gun violence. It's rapes. It's domestic abuse. It's all these sorts of crimes. It's stealing. It's theft. It's vandalism. It's everything, because people simply don't have the self-discipline afforded to us by our Christian faith. The reason we don't do these things as Christians is because it's wrong. It's an affront to God. It's a sin. And also God gives us the ability to love others. We don't do these things to people we love and care about. Today's society models these and molds these kids to care only about themselves. Your feelings are the most important thing. And anything that bothers your feelings, why, you can lash out at that. These are just natural consequences of exactly what's being taught to kids in school today. And you see these, after generations of this, these people grow into adults at some point. But they never really grow up, in a sense. They're emotionally fragile. They're morally void. So you have this problem, and these people then, when they get upset, you know what? And life's pretty depressing. Without God, there's a restlessness to the unsaved person. So,
there is.
Yeah. So all these things now combine together with the pressures of society, and plus they play violent video games. I mean, I'm not saying it's all that fault, but it's just a symptom of the underlying cause of liberalism desensitizing us to the morality, to the value of human life. I mean, we abort babies over 3,000 a day. Kids see this in society. We'll save the whales, or we'll save the spotted tree frog, but kids are being murdered, babies, 3,000 a day, and now even up to the time of birth, and talking even about maybe infanticide. Well, maybe after a few hours we can decide if we want to kill them at that time. This is a culture of death that we're fomenting. Are we surprised then that death comes of it?
Right, and actually, I want to go off on that culture of death that you're talking about there. But before we do that, I do want to remind everyone that you can go and subscribe to us on iTunes. And not only can you, but you need to go and subscribe to us on iTunes, and also subscribe to us on Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts. And you need to go and visit us at theshininglightministries.com. Once again, it's theshininglightministries.com. You need to check that out. You can find all of our articles, and you can find, of course, our podcast there. A few other resources that are good. And we've got several on gun control, actually several articles on gun control. You need to go check that out, read that. One is Comply or Resist. I think I have one that's titled specifically gun control, another one that's titled The Stupid Conservative, and of course this one here that is and I forgot the title of it here.
Violence in America, What's Changed?
Violence in America, What Has Changed? And that's an important one. You need to check that out. And of course, I think this really talks to what's going on in today's day and age. Now, I said I want to talk about this culture of death, because what that really reminds me of is our good friend Phil Haney. Now, not him personally, not the culture of death thing.
Phil just breathed a sigh of relief knowing that he's not. Okay.
Right, that's not what I'm going with there. But last time we both were able to hear him speak, and I think this was also brought up in his first episode on his TV show on Worldview Weekend, is the idea of we live in an abortion culture. Not just this idea of do we have abortion going on in the United States, but it's actually this culture, of death, like you're pointing out. This idea that we live in this culture of death. Just think of, you can see the face of the perpetrators, the face of the shooters, of these mass shooters, but can you see the face of any victims?
Yeah, isn't that something?
And I mean, we think about that. The big problem with why people are okay with abortions is because we don't put a face to the unborn.
And they're not even given a name.
Right.
Nameless, faceless victims. The most innocent amongst us.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, and Phil said, and this is Phil's contention, if you don't know who Phil Haney is, you need to look him up. Good guy, former DHS, real patriotic American, done a lot for our country.
We need to get him on the Shining Light Podcast sometime.
We do. Next time he's in town, we need to see if we can get him through here.
But we might be able to get him on a phone call or something. But
yeah.
But Phil, because I'm sure Phil listens to the Shining Light podcast
religiously.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Phil, if you're listening to this here, we need to have you on the podcast.
But Phil said, the first step, if you're serious about wanting to take your society back, is we have to get rid of abortion, because as long as we stain the blood of this land with the innocent child's blood, we're not going to get God's favor. We're only inviting His wrath more and more. There's natural consequences for wickedness. There's nothing really more wicked than what we do with children in this country. But it points right back to, and our kids growing up through the public education system understand this. If you don't understand it consciously, subconsciously you also get it. So what's the value of a human life? I mean, you can abort a baby. What's wrong with if that's an innocent life? What about that guy over there that makes me mad? I mean, he certainly is not innocent. Maybe he deserves to die. I mean, this is the sort of reasoning that can come about in people's minds.
The devaluing of human life always results to death. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But you quoted one of our founding fathers in your most recent article here, and I think this is something that really hits on this idea of gun control. And that's Ben Franklin.
Oh, okay.
Here, where Ben Franklin goes and he says, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." And not just liberals today, but we have those who would claim the name of conservatism, who are crying out for red flag laws, who are crying out for gun bans, who are crying out for going in. Let's just ban the terrible assault rifle.
And make sure the mentally ill. We need more background checks to keep the mentally ill out of it.
Yeah, pretty soon what they're going to be saying is the mentally ill are those who voted Republican. The mentally ill are those who are Christians.
They're already saying these things, that in certain circles these things are already being circulated.
Right. And here's the thing, that is completely, that's worse than a straw man. Sometimes I like to say, I hate to make a straw man out of my enemy, but sometimes when you look across the battlefield, you realize that it is a brainless scarecrow. And unfortunately, that's what we're fighting.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, if I only had a brain. That's what they're singing. That's their rallying cry, because who are these mass shooters? Who are the ones who are going out shooting them? Are they NRA members who have voted Republican, who are Christians? Is that who these mass shooters are?
They are not. They're predominantly liberals, and like the Dayton shooter of recent vintage. Antifa supporter, just liberal, socialist. This is the way he identified himself. Anti-gun, supporter of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Just a really nasty guy. Poster boy for liberalism in America. That was this guy. And even in high school, they said he'd said some terrible, disparaging things. He kept a list of girls he wanted to rape, and this is just a depraved, reprobate individual. And I guess when you look at somebody like that, and that's what we're cranking out, it's surprising maybe more of this stuff's not happening. But the real problem with this is we allow the liberals, every time something like this happens. Now, there's a lot of liberals that buy this stuff, right? They believe this stuff.
Right.
The people above, the ones that actually introduce liberalism, the movers and shakers, the people that have plans, short-term and long-term plans, know and knew, and Satan knows this, the introduction of liberalism in America would be detrimental to everything about this country, increasing crime rate. And then as crime rates increase, despots will use that as an excuse for increasingly more draconian laws to maintain order. And they will put this out to the people. It's the Hegelian dialectic that we've talked about before. So you have society that owns guns. You want to get rid of those guns, so you introduce liberalism, which causes more violence in America. So you have that beating together. We let them frame the argument, unfortunately. And then you want the synthesis that you get people crying out for relief. Well, maybe we need some more gun control laws. It's the liberalism that's causing the problem. It's not guns. We've let them frame this argument way too long on the results of their ideology, and the answer to the results of their ideology is taking our rights away. No. The problem is liberalism. We need to stop the debate on guns, and let's start talking about what liberalism's done to America, okay? We gave it a shot, and it's been destroying us.
Right. Now, when it comes to the Second Amendment, when it comes to gun control, a big thing is the Second Amendment, which doesn't give us our rights, but it's sitting here recognizing our rights. That is an important distinction to make.
It is. We're not given rights by the Constitution. Our government's set up. Our rights are God-given. The Second Amendment merely tells government this is a God-given right. It doesn't say that, but this was the idea of the founders, that you have no authority to legislate, and we are specifically limiting your ability to not infringing on a person's right to keep and bear arms, because tyranny always comes after the armed citizenry.
Right. What is the purpose of the Second Amendment? Is it for hunting? Is it for even just personal self-defense? Well, what is the purpose for the Second Amendment?
I think in the wording we can go ahead and determine what that purpose is. So the Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now George Mason, so people, the militia, that must mean some sort of government control, and well-regulated means under government authority. No, well-regulated at the time was understood to mean well-armed and trained. But George Mason, one of the co-fathers of the Bill of Rights, James Madison being the other one, George Mason said, in quote, what is the militia, sir? It is all, what do we have it in there? It's all the people but a few elected officials. So the militia, and of course in a well-regulated militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So the militia is talked about, and it's given down at the bottom, the people. And they comprise the militia. So the citizenry, other than a few elected officials, comprise the militia.
You know, and as we're talking about gun control, this really goes a lot into this idea of social justice, because this has become a tenet of social justice. Mm-hmm. This idea of let's take the guns, let's defend the innocent. Isn't it funny? We want to defend the innocent until we find out that it's actually the innocent inside the womb, and then it's let's murder those, is what the left says. But this idea here really goes right along with social justice. And where can people find a good resource on social justice, Patrick?
Well, there is a book coming out. You mean it's in September?
Yep, that's what we've heard.
Yeah. We thought it was going to be out sooner, but there's
and if it doesn't come out in September, I'm protesting.
Yes, so yeah, me too. Because we want this book to come out. This is going to be a fantastic book on different facets of social justice. Now, Sam's been privy to read a few chapters. I've only read a couple, mine and his, but he's got to read a few more. And from what I'm hearing, this is a book you definitely want. Social Injustice, coming out in September. We've got it advertised on our site. If you go to that site and pre-order right now, you can put in the code word Sam or Patrick and get a free audio book. So if you think we're charming right now talking to you, we're going to actually, all the authors are going to read their own chapters to you. So you have an audiobook of 12 different authors reading their chapters. I mean, how much better? And that's part of the pre-ordering process.
I'm really wishing I would have used words that I knew how to pronounce now and not just gone to my thesaurus to find out what to say.
I'm actually glad I kept mine down to about where it needed to be, because then otherwise, because I'm prone to write a little, but I'd had to read a bunch more. So, we kept ours fairly short by comparison. So.
Yeah, some of the chapters might be a little bit longer.
I rolled in at 5,005 words.
I was about 4,600, so
that's nice. That's nice reading.
Yeah.
Right.
You can find justicebook.com. Once again, that's socialinjusticebook.com. Just like Patrick said, use the code Sam or Patrick, and you should use that, and you should get that book. It really is going to be, for all the jokes and stuff that we like to make, this is really going to be this is going to be the most comprehensive book on social justice that's come out, and it is going to be absolutely a guide for the Christian to know how to combat culture and to engage with culture, and especially within politics, by looking at it from a biblical perspective, as more and more people are getting woke and becoming part of that social justice movement. But there are a couple more quotes that I'd like to point out here from your article. One is from William Penn, and William Penn says, "Men must be governed by God, or they will be ruled by tyrants." Now, how does this apply when it comes to gun control?
See, and Satan certainly knows this, and the liberals or the socialists, the Marxists, whatever, they know this as well. So if you're governed by God, that means that you, as a Christian, you practice the self-control, the morality that's biblically given to us. We don't murder because murder is wrong, not because any other reason. We don't steal because stealing is wrong and affront to God. So as a Christian, and when we were a Christian society predominantly, we even a society, when somebody would do these sorts of things, it was looked down upon. Not saying it's not looked down upon now, but there was a stigma to anybody that was breaking the moral laws of God. So people weren't getting too far out of control. So you have that inner barrier against doing these wicked acts. But if you don't have that, then society does get more violent, more lawless. And again, it necessitates government now stepping in and saying, if you're going to act this way, we're going to have to make more and more draconian laws, harsher laws to try to control you, to control these urges, to control this violence. Pitt was simply stating that, and what we're seeing today is it's bearing itself out. When he said that, we were a predominantly Christian society. We're not that society today, and now we have, again, the liberals that are coming forward and other facets in government that are talking about some of these different laws. We need to do this to make you safer. We need to do this to maintain order. That's exactly what William Pitt predicted.
Right. Now, you said this, and then I want to quote John Adams, just as you have it right here. But you said this, Patrick, in your article, "Our form of government, a constitutional republic, was laid on the foundation of Christianity. It was predicted that we couldn't survive as a nation bereft, he uses words here I don't know, of that essential faith and the resultant moral restraint." And then to quote John Adams said, "Because we have no government and armed with power capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion, avarice, ambition, revenge, gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." When we look at this idea, and when it concerns gun control, and we see what's going on in our nation today, it really does kind of scare me, because the reality of it is the reason why gun violence, mass shooting, I need to say, not gun violence, but mass shooting is going up, is simply because of the people. It's not because of the guns. As you mentioned, the technology we have is 100 years old. The problem is the moral fabric of the people. And that scares me, because the reality of it is that we're going to see more violence. And it doesn't matter if they do come and take our guns, although I believe that would start a revolution. But if they do
It did the first time around they tried it.
Yeah, it did. The Redcoats. They how'd that work out for them? Piers Morgan had to go back to England, that's for sure. But we look at this, the problem is that even if they take our guns away, just like it is in England and in other places, people are going to switch to using knives. People are going to switch to using other things, because the issue is with the heart. It's with the liberal.
Well, the last big thing to accomplish with the Obama administration, very liberal administration, they did a lot of things to change the moral fiber with America that was already going the wrong way. They accelerated it. Mainly, the one thing they didn't get accomplished during that tenure that they really wanted was gun control. That's really the last unaccomplished goal. To really help take this nation down, you first have to disarm it. That's the lesson the tyrants of history have taught us. So this is why they're going to push so hard now to accomplish that one last thing, to put themselves in a position to fundamentally not transform America, as Obama said, to destroy America, to finish that destructive process. And again, it's the liberalism that's causing our problems, turning away from God. Something's going to fill it in, and that's exactly what they're doing. So we need to understand, do not let them frame this argument any longer on guns. Let it be about liberalism and the cause of why America does what it does.
Right. We need to seek and find the real issues so that we can find real solutions. Now, Patrick, what is the opposite of a liberal?
Christian.
A Christian. You know, that was, I think, said in our very first podcast that we did. Mm-hmm. I think that's where he said that. And so the real answer to the problems that we have in our society today, because the problem is liberalism, the opposite is being a Christian. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ.
That's the solution.
That's the
Sin
solution.
is the problem. Christ is the solution.
If people were surrendering their lives to Jesus Christ today, there wouldn't be mass shootings.
There wouldn't be, and not only that, even the more important thing, people wouldn't be headed to hell. They would be enjoying life, and to an extent they've never understood peace and contentment and joy that comes only through that relationship with God. That's the key. So what happens in society happens, but our eternal fate, where we choose to go based on that decision, is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Well, for the Shining Light Podcast, this is Pastor Sam.
And Patrick, no compromise with evil Wyett.
Hold on to your guns and have a great day.
You hear him talking about evolution, a spice and berry